Hi, folks, and welcome to What We're Reading this month. My name is Laura.
And I'm Rebecca.
And this is our virtual book club where we share non-fiction books and we talk about how we can apply them to our work as educators and entrepreneurs. We have 2 books this month. Rebecca, would you like to recap what we read?
Sure. We have read Company of One, Why Staying Small is the Next Big Thing for Business by Paul Jarvis. And we also read Feel Good Productivity, Do More of What Matters to You by Ali Abdaal. And that one is brand new. I think it just came out in 2024.
Yeah, it's quite fresh, isn't it? Fresh off the press, as we'd say. Brilliant. So as we're sharing, if you've read these books, or even if you haven't, let us know what you think. We're going to be watching the comments and answering any questions and just responding. So feel free to drop us a comment and also let us know where you are in the world. It's always nice to see who's tuning in. Which of these books should we start with first? We didn't actually decide on which one, did we? So do you have one in particular that you want to kick the conversation off with?
Ooh, let's do Feel Good Productivity first.
I really love the cover, by the way. This is absolutely gorgeous, isn't it?
It is a beautiful book.
Was this one that was recommended by your mastermind group, or did you get the inspiration for this pick elsewhere?
Actually, I got inspired by YouTube. I follow this creator and consume a fair amount of his video content. So through that and through Readwise, which I subscribe to, they shared out the first chapter before it became available for purchase, and I got excited about it.
You know, I feel like I've been living under a rock because I didn't know about this author and his YouTube channel, although I feel like I may have encountered some of his YouTube videos before. I just wasn't aware that he has a significant career as a YouTube creator and the journey from which he actually came into that, from medical, practicing as a doctor, and then moving into creating video content. I don't know, I guess, yeah, probably been living under a rock, I guess, in my case.
Or maybe you have good time management about staying out of YouTube.
I don't know. I think I'm just watching other things like, First We Feast and people eating, hot chicken wings while doing an interview. I think I'm just spending my time on other channels. That's the thing. But I really enjoyed this book. It was nice consolidation of different ideas. Do you want to go first in just kind of sharing a few things that you took away from this one?
Sure. I really enjoyed this book. I am a big fan of psychology and positive psychology, and I thought that the way that we wove research into this with productivity tips was very well done. When I read, I tag my notes with special tag words, and I used psychology in these tags as much as I did productivity, which I thought was interesting. One of the things that was new for me that he mentions is something called commander's intent. And the idea behind that was that when you're a general in the military, which is I think where the term comes from, or even when you're managing freelancers in your small business or working as a manager in a company, your job as a high-level leader is to convey intent. Like, what is the why of this project and the general outline of what it should achieve and how it should look. Your job is not to manage every step that your team takes. And I thought that was a really interesting term to describe that I had never heard before.
It was, and I think it also emphasizes like how you can best spend your time and the importance of delegating tasks and ensuring that you're hiring the right talent onto the team for those different tasks, which I feel like was something we talked about before, wasn't it? Like thinking about the roles needed for the team dynamic and hiring the right people. And then as a leader, leading with that vision and really kind of communicating regularly what the vision is and what the why is. That was really powerful. There were a few other things as well. But before actually we move on to that, like with that idea of the commander's intent, could you visualize that within like an entrepreneur scenario that we're in? I found that one was quite easy for me to apply within, oh yeah, the context of the teams I've worked with before and like leading that vision. But then, yeah, I probably hadn't connected it back to my own work now as a entrepreneur. Had you?
I have thought about it conceptually. Right now, I am a team of one, but I talk with people often who have hired virtual assistants or graphic designers, or they have contractors that they bring onto their team. And I actually did recently have a really good conversation with a colleague about what does it look like to manage those contractors? Are you trying to hire somebody who's an expert in their thing and you provide the outline and let them run? Or do you treat them like an employee of yours that you need to closely manage?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that really, like the interactions with contractors, because I do work and I commission work with contractors, particularly graphic designers. That's something I outsource. So yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. Ah, something to mull over. I know there's a few of the bits that we want to talk about this book. What would you like to talk about next?
One thing that I loved because I fall prey to it all the time and hadn't been able to name it is something he called the 6 week trap. And the idea of that is that sometimes somebody will ask you for a meeting and you look at your calendar and it's crazy now, but they actually want the meeting this coming May. And you look at May and you think, oh, I have tons of free time. I'll go ahead and say, what will it hurt if I take that meeting? But that's because you are months out from May and you haven't actually filled in your calendar yet. You do not have more time. Don't fall prey to the 6 week trap. It happens to me on the regular.
Yeah, and I love the fact that later on he was referencing somebody else, that the whole idea of like, if you're not going to say hell yeah was the phrase he used to something, if it's not a really strong yes, then you should really probably pause and think about it and question whether you should do it at all. And I think the 6 week trap is one of those. And a way in which you can check in with yourself is, how strongly do you feel about this? Is this something you really want to do? Wait a minute, there's a niggling feeling, check in with yourself, and then, just say no and feel empowered to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was brilliant. One other thing that I really took away from this is that he talks about when you need to recharge yourself. We all get tired after long days at work, and we have certain things that we normally do that recharge us, and we have other things that we do because we're tired. And he says, make 2 lists, see if there's any overlap. So, one thing that recharges me is gardening. I also like going for walks, but what I actually do when I feel completely depleted is Instagram doom scrolling, which makes me
Mhm.
super sad. So, this was a valuable call out for me.
There's a conversation I had with Adrian Bethune on the podcast, TESOL Pop podcast, about exactly that, where he goes into make lists about activities that are active responses to your stressors, so that you don't fall into the hole of passive responses, such as like watching Netflix with a packet of crisps. That one's mine, which doesn't really make me feel good. It doesn't really rejuvenate me. And he talked about like taking time when you're not stressed. A good reflection activity is to build a bank of active responses to stress, such as you mentioned gardening, going for a walk, spending time with friends, those sort of things, as ways that can really refill your cup rather than, falling into habits that just probably won't serve you. And that's something, he talks about that in this little book here. We didn't read it this time, but this is a great book by Adrian Bethune and Emma Kell about teacher wellbeing and self-care. And he talks about those type of things, which I think this is a fabulous book. I wish I had this one when I was actually starting teaching, to be honest, but it hadn't been published until a few years ago. So yeah, no, that was a really good point. I'm really glad you raised that about activities, rejuvenating yourself, and not falling into that 6 week trap. There was one other thing that I remember you wanted to mention about this book, the feel good productivity. What was that?
This is a piece of advice I've heard a lot of times before, so it wasn't new. But he says if you've committed to something as a priority, I think he mentions exercise particularly, but if you've committed to something and you don't actually schedule it on your calendar, it is very unlikely to happen. So he says if you've committed to something, if it matters to you, even if it's just a 15-minute chunk of time that you need, you have to block it on your calendar.
Yeah, these are things that I know because having read Clear's Atomic Habits, I felt this was kind of borrowed from that a bit, or maybe inspired by Clear's work in Atomic Habits, about making time for things that you want to build, reducing friction as well, which came up in Ali Abdaal's book as well, about like putting prompts in place to reduce friction for things that you want to start doing. I know these things and I appreciate the reminder because I don't always do them. Blocking out time, I should do that more often for things, including breaks.
Yeah, I think that's called out there, blocking out time for breaks. It seems like such a small thing, and yet I find it so challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why we read these books and share it and then hold ourselves accountable, right? That's the whole point. Cool. I know we've got another book to talk about, so I'm going to very briefly just share some of the things that I took away from this, which I think are particularly relevant for folk who may fear trying new things or speaking on the conference circuit. We're about to go into conference season at the moment in education. A lot of people are going to be speaking in public, and that can be a bit of a nerve-wracking experience. There was a lovely thing he said on, I think it was page 42, where he says like about how to approach failure or your attitude to failure. So he said, no failure is ever just failure. It's an invitation to try something new. And I think if folk kind of took this approach, like new things and experimenting and stepping outside one's comfort zone to follow what they want to be doing, to follow their purpose, to not see their learning process and how messy learning can be and trying new things can be as a negative thing, but just something as a journey, an adventure where they can learn and grow, and not, oh, you're not perfect at it, so therefore you shouldn't continue. I thought that was a really powerful comment that he added in quite early on in the book, actually. And I loved his Batman analogy of like, if you want to kind of build your confidence and courage, I think it was courage he was talking about, maybe take on a Batman kind of persona, like a persona that's bigger than you. He talked about Adele having a persona for her stage. Beyonce has Sasha Fierce, right, as her alter ego, and building something like that for yourself to kind of take yourself out of your maybe negativity and things that are holding you back to get into the spaces you want to be in. Like you want to do it, there's just something holding you back.
Yeah, I like that aspect as a performance. It took me a very long time to embrace conference speaking. I really enjoy it, but I have been so nervous. You know how nervous I was about this, and I do think the idea that it's a performance or you're a character is really helpful when you're trying to take the first steps.
It puts a little bit of distance, doesn't it, between I feel like oneself and the stage in a really positive light. The whole idea, and you can even have rituals and stuff that kind of get you into that persona, into that role, what we'd say like in drama. And then it feels less personal when things don't necessarily go as planned because it's happening more to the persona of the public speaker persona than
Hey,
to
audio.
self. Brilliant. Shall we talk about oh, can you hear me still?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Audio emergency.
No problem, can still hear you okay. Shall we move on to?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So this one was recommended by Andrew Woodbury. Actually, he's a fellow podcaster. And thank you, Andrew, for suggesting this book. I hadn't actually heard of this book, and I'm really glad he suggested it, because the whole principle is about kind of thinking small and not pursuing what I think. There's a lot of pressure, isn't there, with like success and like business models where it's like, oh, you just need to grow and you need to scale. And that's the model you should pursue, is scaling, getting bigger, getting better. And there is obviously lots of texts and media out there that kind of promote that, but this takes a different approach where it really kind of emphasizes the idea of, you know, focusing on delivering great experiences for your customers and letting that be what leads your business priorities, not how can I get bigger and how can I scale and how can I make millions, but how can I provide exceptional experiences for my target clients, whether that's students or fellow educators, whoever that may be. And I thought that was a really lovely reminder that he kind of takes and opens the book with, and it's a philosophy that flows throughout the book. So really like that opening. What did you think as a first thought to this one, Rebecca?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. One of the things that I thought was brilliant is that in the first chapter, he hits us hard right from the start, talking about, when you are an expert in your field, for many of the people watching us, it might be education, but in any particular field, you typically have a set of duties that you do, and you become more and more expert deep in that topic. But if you want to start your own business or move your side income stream to being your primary income stream,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to be doing sales, marketing, project management, client retention. And he doesn't mention these, but I think it was important to note also, like, there's bookkeeping and legal in there too.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes further, like at the end of the book, I believe he calls out that when you are a company of one or a very small company, you might spend 50% of your time doing the thing where your expertise is. And then there is everything else it takes to run a business.
I'm laughing here because I think it was the reminder I needed to hear, even though it was quite fierce. I love the whole opening of like, you can be successful. You don't need to just chase growth. Just focus on your customers, provide a great experience. Word of mouth is the most important thing. It's 5 times more powerful than anything else. Don't do cold calling. I was like, oh, this sounds so safe. Like, this sounds really good. And he's like, come here, come here. By the way, you're going to be doing everything yourself. Are you sure you want to quit that job? Yeah, your life is going to be 50% of admin. Are you sure this is what you want to be doing? Oh, and your pension, have you thought about that? And I was like, oh, this is taking a hard turn.
I liked when you called it a reality check earlier. I didn't
Yeah.
associate that term, but that's exactly what it was.
It's pretty tough. Like, don't be fooled by like the opening and the philosophy of that. That was, yeah, I needed to hear that. I did need to hear that. But it hasn't changed how I feel about being an entrepreneur and an individual business, independent business owner. I still love what I do, and I'm more rejuvenated by what I do. Even, okay, do I love doing admin? No, but I did a lot of admin in my previous job anyway. At least the admin, I can connect it more to a very personal goal, and it's more kind of relevant to me. And it's, in a way, like, if I'm doing admin for my pension, I'm going to immediately benefit from it. You know what I mean? You can put those connections in place. That's quite like, oh yeah, okay, visualize, see the benefit. It makes it a little sweeter to do, to be honest.
Yeah,
So
I think it was less of a like, here be dragons, don't go here, than this is something that you should be aware of if you're going to take this step.
yeah, for sure. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about this book, Company of One? There was a few more points, right, before we wrap up today?
One big thing for me, the author is Canadian, and he, I think, works with a lot of American clients, US Americans, and he mentioned that there's no national healthcare system here for my US-based friends. So
Yeah.
if typically here, healthcare is tied to insurance through an employer. And if you are going to leave an employer, you need a plan for that, a very serious plan. And one of the things he called out that I had actually forgotten is that a really good way to address that can be through membership in professional associations. Often they may offer some sort of group plan that you can join, like with a chamber of commerce or COAB or an organization like that.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. And I really appreciate that you've kind of filled in the gap, because when he was talking about that, I was like, what is this? But of course, if that's the context and the majority of clients he's working with, that kind of healthcare structure and finding ways to rebuild that as an edupreneur, entrepreneur, in a way that doesn't break the bank, I think it's a really good idea. It sounds like a kind of cooperative, collective. Is that kind of the idea?
I think so. It's being a part of a group policy instead of an individual policy, I think we'd say.
Oh, okay. All the things I need to learn, like new things. But anyway, I'm going to pick up quite a bit when I'm in Nashville next month. I think as we're wrapping up today, what are we going to be keeping as pride of place on the shelf? Do you have a favorite out of these two books?
I actually don't, and that's a first for me. How about
Oh my
you?
goodness. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, they both gave me different things. I think if I'm going to base it on what gave me the most new kind of food for thought, and this is just subjective, this will be different from everyone, it'll be this one. There was a lot of really good stuff in here and hard reminders that I needed. This one, I did love it. Don't get me wrong. I love the Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal, but I felt there was a lot of stuff in here that I already knew. The Atomic Habits being a key one that came through. So I didn't take as much away from this one as I did the other. And that's the only reason for that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I loved them both. I got something from both of them. Great use of our reading time this month.
Yes, I agree. What are we reading next?
We are reading Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert. I forgot how to pronounce his last name. Laura, do you remember?
No, I'm sorry. Can we hold up the book though? I know you have it there.
Let's
And we
hold
can
up
just
the
show
book.
folks.
I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry, sir.
And this is quite a heavy book, so I'm going to get the virtual copy of this as I'm traveling. And in terms of dates of when we're going to be doing our next live, we're actually going to be doing it from Nashville, from well, we're going to be speaking at Coabe, both of us. So if you are there, come and say hello to us. We'd love to meet you. And we'll obviously set a date for when we're going to do the live in the same space. I'm actually going to see you in real life, Rebecca, for the first time.
First
It's going
time
to be
ever.
amazing.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll set the date and time for when we're going to do the next book club. So watch this space, follow TESOL Pop to stay up to date on when it's going to be. We've got the book already picked. It's quite a chunky one, so you're probably going to want to buy that now. That's why we've only picked one, so you have enough time to read it between now and our date in March. Brilliant.
And
So
Laura, I
lovely.
feel like a PSA that I need to give you is that Nashville is famous for hot chicken. So maybe you can combine that YouTube hot chicken love with the Nashville book club we're gonna do live.
Yeah, let's do that. Like you can ask me a question. We can take turns asking questions as we go through the hot sauces. That would be amazing. Brilliant. Thanks everybody for watching. Leave comments and questions. I hope you've enjoyed it and take care and happy reading. Thanks, Rebecca.